Hi, it's Jennifer Mazzarillo, president of Maverick Consulting Group for Tuesday, July 18th, and here is today's Maverick moment. Wanted to bring forward a couple of topics. One in particular that I'm going to address today is interview questions that some of my coaching candidates are struggling with during interviews. And in particular, we're going to start with a handy-dandy list of a couple of questions here. So one question that a couple of my coaching candidates have struggled with, especially because some of them have been out of work almost a year or even longer than a year, is when they get asked the question, so what have you been doing for the last year or 12 months, 16 months, whatever. I think the way to handle that, obviously, is you want to be prepared for that kind of question for obvious reasons. If you've been out of work for a year, they want to know, well, what have you been up to? What have you been spending your time doing? So the more confident you are in your answer, I think the better you're going to come across to a client. And as an example, if you've been working on courses, if you've been maybe starting a side hustle, doing bookkeeping or, doing CPA volunteering on the side, or starting maybe something for new immigrants in terms of helping them integrate into Canada, whatever the case may be in terms of what you've been up to for the last 12 months, I think you want to have a story. And if I was an HR person, or if I was, a hiring manager, I would absolutely want to know what you've been up to. Now, part of that is probably going to be in your part of your answer is probably going to be you saying, well, part of my time has been spent looking for work. Okay. Now, rather than just say, well, I've been looking for work, I know when I hear that answer, I kind of think, okay, well, why is it taking you so long? And maybe, what's wrong with your process maybe? Or are you being too picky? What's your criteria? It is absolutely likely that you are a great candidate and that you have been pounding the pavement and you're still not working after 12 months. So it's not to say I'm trying to make light of the situation. I'm not. Trust me, I deal with these candidates every week. But what I'm trying to say is, rather than just say, oh, well, I've been looking for work, and leaving it very open-ended, open to interpretation by HR and the hiring manager, you may want to back that up with, this has been my search approach for the last 12 months, or, I took some personal time off to travel, or, we had a new addition to the family, or I was taking care of an ill parent, and then I've really just started my job search in the last 6 months, and here's kind of what I've been doing in my job search. I've been networking. I've been looking at postings. I've been going out to meet recruiters. I've been doing some, brush up on my technical, whatever. So at least you're filling in that gap. It is more common these days than when I initially got into recruiting 12 years ago almost. It's much more common that you're going to see candidates with a gap on their resume. So what I would say to hiring managers and HR folks out there that are interviewing these candidates is, can you please try not to put these candidates on trial? Because they're struggling enough. I don't think they need to be made to feel small and not worthy and defensive when you ask it in a way that implies, well, you've just been sitting around watching Oprah for 12 months and watching the paint dry. So I think there's a way to ask the question in sort of a non-confrontational way that doesn't put that candidate on the defensive. I would ask that you try to do that approach. You absolutely have every right to understand why there's the gap on the resume and what happened and what's going on in that time, because I ask every candidate I meet that question. So I have no problems with the question. I think we have to be sensitive to how we ask the question. The other one I got was, why did you leave your last job? This is a good question as well, especially if the circumstances around you leaving your last job were less than favorable. People get fired, people get restructured, you leave on your own without anything lined up because you just couldn't take it anymore. there's various reasons. I think, again, what you want to do is be confident in your answer. You want to own it. And if you were terminated, then I think there's a way you can talk about that and try to understand the reasons why, what would have happened. Maybe there was a fit issue with you and maybe a new boss coming in. Maybe they wanted to bring in their own people. Maybe there were some performance issues on your end, and you really need to look in the mirror and think long and hard about what your accountability is on the reasons why you're no longer working where you were working. I don't think it's fair that you try to, skive that off on somebody else and not take ownership for that. So I think you want to be really open and honest with yourself, and then, think about a way that you can position it that obviously, you're still trying to sell yourself, but you're not lying, and you're not trying to be deceitful, but you're also trying to paint it in such a way that you're being open and transparent while at the same time protecting a little bit of your ego and sort of your track record and your reputation. So, as an example, I had a coaching client that talked about, just having a very different philosophy with the new person at the top about what their role was and should be. And they had a fundamental disagreement on, roles and responsibilities. And so in that case, you can just call it like it is, which is we had a fundamental not meeting of the minds regarding what my role was. And so, as an organization, they decided that, my services were no longer required. I think you want to obviously position it as positively as you can, but if push came to shove and they wanted to see a record of employment and it says terminated, and you've said, oh, well, I left on my own, well, that's being deceitful and lying and really unprofessional. So I think you want to find a way to be transparent and honest when you're answering that question. But again, hiring managers and HR folks, please try not to put candidates on the defensive and make them feel like they're on trial. I have had instances where candidates have come back and said to me, I felt like I was, on trial as a defendant of, defending myself about why I left my last job, and they made me feel very uncomfortable, like they were almost persecuting me for, not believing what my answer was, whatever. So I think, we have to be sensitive to how we ask these questions. The last one I'm going to quickly talk about is, do you have questions about the role? When you're asked this question in an interview and you say, no, I have no questions about the role, are you kidding me? Please. You must have questions about the role. This is your opportunity to go and probe into more detail about the role that you want to be hired for. I would be asking questions. I would bring the job description to the interview. And although I don't like people bringing props, I would say have the job description maybe in a portfolio with you. And if you get this question, you have every right to say, do you mind if I pull out the job description? I'm actually interested in understanding what percentage of my time is going to be spent on bullets 1, 2, and 3, or 2 and 6, or whatever. And you can start to ask some intelligent questions, insightful questions. 1, it makes it look like you've done your homework. 2, you are getting a little bit more rapport with the interviewer because you are showing an interest in the role, and you are getting, your questions answered about what the role is all about. And maybe once you hear the answer, you're not as interested, or maybe you hear the answer and you're more interested in the role because you realize that travel is only 5% of the job, and you get that clarified. So when they ask you if you have questions about the role, jump in and start to think about some intelligent questions beforehand so that you can not miss a beat and go right into it with the interviewer about the role. This is something I find, candidates don't ask good enough questions in an interview, and then they wonder why 3 months later, they're maybe in the wrong place. And, candidates, you got to remember that HR and hiring managers aren't perfect, and they may not ask you the right questions. They may not ask them in the right way. They're doing the best they can, and hopefully you're bringing your A game to the interview. So hopefully those 3 questions give you a little bit more insight in how to better answer and field those questions. If you do have any questions about improving your interview skills, certainly reach out and contact me, and we can set up some time to have a chat. Anyway, have a great day and all the best.